And that wasn't the half of it. The killer had just pulled off another very public execution inside a national institution. In a post-9/11 world, that meant a new level of intensity for everything. Press coverage, public paranoia, pressure on the police to get this thing under control, to end it before anyone else died. No one would care that it was an almost impossible assignment. How many years had it taken them to get the Green River Killer, or the Zodiac? As to where DCAK might try to take things from here, I didn't even want to speculate about it. Right now, I had a body to see. 2 bodies, actually. Mother and child. Chapter 72. "God damn him to hell," Sampson said in an angry voice that he managed to keep under his breath. "That son of a bitch. That miserable fucker." As homicide scenes go, this one was particularly obscene and troubling. This was a place where families went to be entertained. The IMAX theater had soaring walls, textured only with directional lighting. The rows of high-backed seats were steeply raked in a concave arch across the auditorium, like a modern take on an old medical lecture theater. Right down to the cadaver, right? The victim, a French woman named Abby Courlevet, had apparently been killed near the base of the 5-story-high movie screen. That seemed odd to me, but it was the advance word we'd gotten from Gil Cook, and no one else was questioning it so far. I probably shouldn't have either. Not yet. The poor woman's body lay face up now. Her hands had been tied behind her back, and even from a distance I could see silver duct tape wrapped across her mouth, just like at the Riverwalk. I also spotted a wedding band on her hand. As I got closer, I saw that the tape was stained dark over her lips where blood had been unable to escape, probably after internal injuries. Mrs. Courlevet's white dress was discolored and looked rusty brown all over. She'd obviously been stabbed. Repeatedly. Next to the mutilated body was an oversized canvas rucksack. There were metal grommets around the top. The sack was laced with a thick cord, presumably for tying it closed. Another present from DCAK? Another clue for us to follow nowhere? More bloodstains and several perforations showed me what I already knew instinctively, that the victim had been stabbed inside the sack. The vicious killer had left Abby Courlevet in there, either dead or dying. The EMTs had taken her out in hopes of reviving her, but it was obviously too late. When I lifted the empty bag to look for markings, I found U.S. Postal Service and a long string of numbers stenciled on the side in faded black letters. So was this the latest calling card? Had to be. But what was it supposed to mean? What was DCAK saying to us this time? And was this murder committed by him, or possibly his copycat? Witness accounts had already described a blue uniform and cap on the killer. Maybe that was DCAK's version of an in-joke. He'd gone postal on us. He'd also left us holding the bag. I walked to the far side of the floor, near the entrance the killer had used to come in. From here I tried to imagine the events as Detective Cook had described them. The killer had needed to catch Mrs. Courlevet unaware, long enough to bind her hands and mouth, and to get the cloth bag over her head. A mat of dried blood in her hair indicated some kind of blunt trauma, but probably not enough to knock her out. Conscious would be better anyway. More effective for DCAK's purposes, for the theater of it. And in fact, witnesses had seen the bag moving when he'd dragged it into the theater. I walked back to the woman's body again and looked around at the empty auditorium. This audience was closer to him than any of the others had been, so he'd needed to work quickly. No time for lengthy speeches or the usual sickening grandstanding. He hadn't been able to make a full star turn tonight. So what had been so attractive about this particular location, this audience, this French woman? The impact seemed to have been mostly visual. He'd shouted, "Special delivery," and then got right to it. Half a dozen vicious swings with a blade large enough to be seen from the theater's back row. I looked down at Mrs. Courlevet, then back at the empty sack next to her. Suddenly, another angle occurred to me. What else might be tucked inside there? Was there something else in the mail sack? I worked the bag open, dreading what I might find. Finally, my hand touched a flat piece of plastic. Something was definitely there. What? I pulled the object out. What the hell? It was a postal worker's ID. A second photo had been pasted over the original. The name was changed, too. It said Stanley Chasen. The image on the ID was a match to the preliminary description we'd gotten. Elderly white man, possibly in his 70s, silver hair, bulbous nose, horn-rimmed glasses, heavy-set and tall. "Who's Stanley Chasen?" Sampson asked. "Probably nobody," I said. Then it hit me. I knew what he was doing. I was thinking like him and not liking the feeling. It's a figment of this sick bastard's imagination. He's creating characters, then he's playing them, one at a time. And all the characters inside his head are killers. And what? He wants us to catch them all? Chapter 73. I didn't get to leave the National Air and Space Museum until 5 in the morning, and we weren't even finished with our workday yet. Bree and I sent Sampson home to his wife and little one, and then we drove back up to Baltimore, where there was still a mess of paperwork to finish up and a situation to try to make some sense out of, if we possibly could. On the drive, we talked about the woman who had been DCAK's accomplice at the Best Western, the driver of the blue sports car. Had he hired her just for the night? Or had she been in on the murder spree all along? No way to tell yet, but the scenario led to lots of speculation on the ride up I-95, some of it connecting to Kyle Craig and his escape from ADX Florence. When we finally got back to the Best Western, Bree and I hugged for a minute in the car, but that was about all we did. A hug and a kiss. Then we were needed inside. It was too early to call my house, so I waited until later, well into the morning as it turned out. When I finally called, I got the answering machine. I decided to keep my message light, the exact opposite of what I was feeling. "Hey, chickens, it's Dad. Listen, I'm working through the morning, but I'll be home later this afternoon. Promise. Seems like a good night for a movie. That is, if I can convince anyone to join me. And if I can stay awake." Bree took her tired eyes off some paperwork and smiled over at me. "You must be pretty exhausted, too. You're a real good dad, Alex." "Trying. I'm a guilty dad, for sure." "No." Bree repeated, "You're a good dad. Trust me on that. I had a bad one." As it turned out, it was past 3 o'clock when I finally dragged myself home to 5th Street. A shower and a little something from the kitchen, and I'd be ready to go again. Maybe just an hour or two of nap time. As I was getting out of the car, I saw Janny's long face. She was standing on the front porch, watching me come up the walk. Her features were still, and she didn't move or speak when our eyes met. "What's going on?" I asked, as I humped up the steps. "Something happened." "Yeah, Dad, it sure did. Damon's run away." My head tilted back involuntarily. What? Maybe I was groggy and hadn't heard Janelle right. "Run away? What are you talking about? Where is he?" "He left home 5 hours ago, and he hasn't come back. Never told anybody where he was going. Nothing. Nana's been going crazy." This didn't compute. Not with Damon. It just wasn't something he'd ordinarily do. 5 hours? "Janny, what is going on? What am I missing here?" Janny stared hard at me. The basketball coach from Cushing was here today to talk to you. You missed the meeting. The prep school coach from Massachusetts? I know what Cushing is, Janelle, I said. Just then, Nana came out to the porch. Little Ali trailed a half-step behind his grandmother. I've spoken with his friends and the parents that I can reach. No one's seen him, Nana said. I pulled out my phone. I'll call Sampson. We can— Nana cut me off. I spoke to John already. He's out searching the neighborhood. Just then, the phone in my hand buzzed. I hadn't known that it had been ringing off the hook for hours. Sampson's name came up on the caller ID. John? I said into the receiver. Alex, I've got Damon. Chapter 74. Where is he? Where are you? I asked, paranoia blossoming inside my head. Kyle Craig had threatened my family. VCAK said he was watching us too. We're over at Sojourner Truth. Day wandered around town, and he came up here to shoot some hoops. We had a talk. He's ready to come home now. We'll be back there in a few minutes. No, I'll come to you, I said. I wasn't sure why. I just felt it should be that way. I wanted to go to Damon, not the other way around. Can I come, Daddy? Ali looked up at me, his small hands outstretched, curious brown eyes always ready for the next little adventure in his life. Not this time, pup. I'll be back soon. You always say that. I do. And I always come back. Eventually I do, anyway. I drove over to the school, the same one Damon and Janny had gone to, and Ali would be attending before I knew it. Day and Sampson were playing one-on-one, pounding the school's cracked pavement court. Damon still had on the khakis and nice blue dress shirt he'd probably worn for the meeting with the prep school coach. A red and black necktie hung out of his back pocket. He scored easily on Sampson as I approached the court. I laced my fingers into the chain-link fence. Pretty nice move, I said. Of course, you only had to beat an old man to get to the hoop. Damon played it cool. Cold, really, and didn't even look my way. Sampson bent and leaned on his knees, sweat dripping off his face, and not just because it was 80 degrees out. Damon was good, getting better, too. Bigger and better, and a whole lot quicker than he ever was before. It struck me that I hadn't seen him play ball in a long time. I'm up next, I called to Sampson. He held up an index finger that clearly said, I'm out. That's okay. Game's over, Damon said. He came out through the gate near my car, and I caught his arm. I needed him to look at me, which he did. Daggers. Sharp ones that cut deep. Damon, I'm sorry about what happened today. Couldn't be helped. If you guys are all good, I'm going to take off, Sampson said. He clapped Damon on the back as he went. The big man knows when to hang in and when to head out. Let's sit. I motioned to the stone school steps. Damon reluctantly sat down with me. I could tell he was pissed, but maybe he was confused, too. We almost never got this angry, let it get this bad. Damon was a good kid. A great kid, actually, and I was proud of him most of the time. You want to start? I asked. Okay. Where the hell were you? I said. I knocked the ball out of his hand and stilled it against the step. You don't talk to me like that, no matter what, Day. We're going to have a conversation, but it's going to be respectful. I put on a tough face. Day would never know how much what he'd said had hurt me. Probably he'd needed to get even. I understood. But still. Sorry, he mumbled, and made it sound half sincere. Damon, I was literally all over the map with this case. Last night and this morning, I haven't slept at all. And someone else died out there. That's not for you to worry about, but it's